Here is a small disclaimer from me. I realize that Booyakasha is the show's main catchphrase over Cowabunga, and honestly, I don't have a problem with people trying out newer things, but not saying a time-honored trademark catchphrase at least once from all four turtles will sort of leave a bad taste in my mouth. I will give the new phrase a chance, as it does sound pretty catchy, but I hope we hear those four say Cowabunga before the end of the season or the series in general. Other than that, this is Double RPG here, and welcome to my review of Episode 6. Today, we take a look at the episode which reintroduces a classic character from the 1987 series, Metalhead. This time, he gets a complete 180 from how the original animated show portrayed him. Stay tuned for the review to find out. Our episode starts off with the turtles fighting against the Krang in a warehouse for their weapons development, and Donnie begins to feel some alienation in not being able to fight well as his brothers because of how less powerful the bow staff is in comparison to Leo's katana blades and Raph's size. Ironically, his staff breaks from a pistol shot of the Krang, and the turtles stand up against them in a new plasma cannon that the aliens create. Fortunately, Leo turns the tide by destroying the remaining androids and the cannon to force the aliens to retreat elsewhere. Leo and his brothers return home while Donatello becomes very interested in how the Krang's technology works, meaning Donnie snatches a partially damaged body to study it and to build a weapon to help fight back, then having to use his bow staff all the time. Leo, Raph, and Mike seem uncertain about this, but Donnie insists while still feeling alienated. Back at the sewer lair, Donnie thinks about upgrading his weaponry for better use in combat, while April discovers more about the Krang's whereabouts, and she makes an attempt to see what the Krang are up to. Leo tells her not to go because of the possible dangers that she could face, but demands that she goes so that her protection isn't being blocked from her desire to find out where her father is. Shortly thereafter, Donnie introduces his brothers to a new invention that will help him fight off against the Krang, to which the weapon looks like a small robotic turtle. Mikey tries to play baby talk in tickling the thing, but it answers back with the famous cartoony joke with being supplied and readying itself with numerous weapons. Sorry, Mike, but the robot doesn't like to be tickled. Meanwhile, April arrives at the Krang's weapons development warehouse, and she sneaks in to learn that the aliens are planning on contaminating the city's water supply with the mutagen to make New York City a ground zero with mutants. Now that's some very serious stuff right there if you ask me. Luckily, she manages to avoid capture when she accidentally knocks over a fire extinguisher and beats the crap out of one of the androids while it falls out a window. Man, she has grown from a damsel in distress to a badass heroine. But she is very scary too. Back at the sewer lair, Mikey kicks in his name dubbing of things again as he calls the small robotic turtle with the codename Metalhead. Leo is still unconvinced that Metalhead will be a great asset for being a ninja, and Donnie provokes his brothers to try and attack it. They all oblige, but those three get a rude awakening by Metalhead's insane strength. Afterwards, Leo, Raph, and Mikey take Metalhead on an exercise mission to test its worth, while Donnie operates it from the sewer lair. Too bad for them, as Metalhead's presence only causes trouble as the noise can easily present their location, and the turtles find April, who was looking for them, as she tells them about the Krang's plan, which forces them to go back to the warehouse. Leo, Raph, and Mike go fight the Krang while April and Metalhead watch from above, with Donnie clumsily trying to woo April with his blatant one-liners. It's kind of funny, but it sort of wears thin when it is done to death at this point. Meanwhile, Leo and his bros are cornered by the Krang, and Metalhead jumps into the action. He unleashes a huge arsenal of weapons on the Krang, and they all get obliterated one by one. However, the recklessness and over-obsession of his toy causes Donnie to not realize that gas canisters were nearby, and Metalhead gets knocked into a beam as his control chip is destroyed. Donnie is extremely upset by his over-obsession, and he sees a Krang take control of Metalhead to turn it against Leo and the others. Donatello is stopped by Splinter, and his sensei tells him to go help his brothers fight. Before leaving, Donnie is given a new bow staff, and he leaves for the warehouse. At the warehouse, Leo, Raph, and Mike are getting stomped by Metalhead and the Krang, but the tides are turned when Donnie makes his entrance. Donatello tells his brothers to fight the Krang while he takes on Metalhead alone. Their battle ensues, Donnie's bow staff is broken once more, and he ensures his victory by having Metalhead destroy a metal beam to land on him, while Donnie's bow staff impales the robot to fully deactivate it. The Krang declare that the turtles are now their enemy, and they will come back for their revenge. Back at the sewers, Donnie is saddened for being responsible for Metalhead's creation, but Splinter lifts his spirits when telling him that his actions at the warehouse prevented the Krang from achieving their mission. Donnie realizes that his master's words about fighting an enemy is by his own presence and skill in combat, and not by a weapon which he creates to take his place. This motivates the tech-savvy to upgrade his bow with something different, and he has a rocket missile attached that he accidentally ignites. Donnie tells his brothers to run, Leo and his brothers head for the hills, and the episode comes to a close. Oh, cartoon humor, I love it. This episode delivers with more action like all the other episodes, and it never even gets old based on what all the turtles will do, and what tactics they will use to win their battles. I would say that this has to probably be the best fight against the Krang this far, especially with all the action being delivered by Metalhead this time around. The character development for Donatello was another great show for us all, and I honestly thought it would have been hard since Donatello is more tech-savvy than his brothers. Also, Metalhead being given a complete 180 interpretation from the 1987 cartoon was a nice change. In the original cartoon, Krang from Dimension X created Metalhead to fight the turtles, but the robot realizes that the turtles look like him, as they should all be all for one with each other. This time around, Metalhead is created by Donatello, and the robot's likeliness is destroyed at the end when the Krang takes possession of it. I really like it when newer shows try out things in the opposite way as long as the writing is good and the presentation doesn't get stale. Even the jokes and the visual effects are pretty rad and evenly balanced. It doesn't go overboard like it did in episode 5. Now, the one thing I found to be very lacking in this episode when compared to episode 3 was the amount of character development for Donatello. He suffers the same fate as Raphael, as I feel that his development with Metalhead's creation wasn't given the full limelight when compared to Mikey's friendship and resolve against Chris Bradford in episode 4. What I'm trying to say is that there are certain subplots that I find very questionable, like April's infiltration of the weapons development warehouse while learning of the Krang's intentions, and the fight against the Krang while Donnie is flirting with April while watching the fight from above. I mean, I know he has a crush on her, but we already seen it at the beginning with Donnie's idea of upgrading his weaponry with Metalhead's creation. Doing that a second or third time kinda gets a bit stale. Oh, and the whole thing with April's warehouse infiltration and learning her father's disappearance could have been saved for another episode. Seriously, this episode is about Donnie's time to shine as a character. All in all, I guess you could say that I felt that episode 6 just didn't go through a complete circle like Raph, but it was very enjoyable to see how it went. In conclusion, episode 6 was a good episode, but it does have its flaws. I feel that Donatello should have been given more screen time as Raph in episode 3, and some of the subplots could have been centered around him and Metalhead. Plus, it was kinda sad to see Metalhead meeting his demise for being shown for such a short time. However, the episode does deliver with more stellar action sequences, good running jokes, and a nice presentation with some very good visual effects, such as when Metalhead attacks Leo, Raph, and Mikey while being in the Krang's possession. I would say that this is probably the weakest episode by far, but it isn't really that bad. I would give this episode a 7 out of 10. It could have been better, and some certain subplots could have been saved for other episodes when something that is centered on somebody should have taken full priority. Alright, that does it for this review of episode 6 of Nickelodeon's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. Tune in next week for my review of episode 7, Monkey Brains. Donatello and April discover a psychic monkey in the next episode? Does this mean that the subplots I felt were unnecessary going to become necessary in the next episode? It may seem that way. Anyway, be sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and be sure to rate, comment, and favorite this video for more episodic reviews of this show, and be sure to subscribe to my channel for more content in the future. This is RRPG signing off, and I'll see you next week, Turtle fans. Booyakasha!